introduction. So, hi
Okay.
everyone. Sorry about the little bit of a late start. My name is Courtney Fisher. I'm the Assistant Director of the American Indian Foods Program, and today is the start of our April webinar series. You can join us every Thursday for informative webinars covering various topics, including market overview and making the most of trade shows. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of the webinar, so please enter your questions into the chat so that we can remember them towards the end, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So our first presentation today is how to market your food products in the Middle East, and I'd like to introduce Quentin Gray, President and CEO of Q Gray and Associates, a consulting business that helps companies and organizations market food products around the world. He is the former agriculture counselor at the U.S. Consulate in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and
That's correct.
former agricultural trade officer at the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he advised U.S. companies on how to market their food products in the Middle East. Now, Quentin, if you'd like to let us know what our companies should do to market their food products in the Middle East.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. First of all, what I want to say is I want to make this seminar about you and your company and how your company can sell products to the Middle East. And the first thing I want to mention is, and the question I got so often when I was working in Saudi Arabia and working in Dubai was, do the consumers in the Middle East buy the products I produce or my company produces? And the answer, I would always say yes. I would say if you consume that product in the United States, that product is being consumed in the Middle East. And the reason why is because all of the fast food establishments that we have here are in the Middle East, such as McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut, Five Guys, etc. They're all in the Middle East. And all kinds of cuisines are eaten in the Middle East. Everyone that you can find here, you'll find in the Middle East. Of course, food that comes from the Middle East is eating there. Lebanese food, Italian food, Chinese food, seafoods, meats, anything that you would have here is being consumed in the Middle East. So they're very familiar with our products. Even all the grocery store items that you find in the States, most of the brands are there as well. So they are very accustomed to what we consume here in the United States. And the second question I would always get was, if I start doing business in the Middle East, will it be a sustained business? And the answer again is yes, because in the Middle East, as we all know, that the Middle East is in a desert. And so for a long time, governments in the Middle East tried to produce food in terms of pumping a lot of money into agriculture, into wheat production, into grain production, and to trying to make the Middle East self-sufficient in food production. And it didn't work for two reasons. The first reason is the cost of production was so high that it was cheaper to import the food than to produce it using water that's been desalinated water is what they were using. And it was so much cheaper to import the food. And then the second reason is because the water tables were going down so low that it was causing, when the water tables go down low, the land actually can sink. So they were having that problem so much in Saudi Arabia and Dubai that the governments decided that they were going to stop subsidizing local agriculture. And so just in the fall of December 2018, the Saudi government actually made a decree to cut hay production by 42%. And because it said, it tried to mitigate the fall in the water tables. So it decreed to cut their local production. So all of that hay that would have been produced in Saudi Arabia is going to be produced, is going to be imported. And so there's an anticipation that there's going to be a lot of hay imports into Saudi Arabia. The same thing was happening in Dubai. So Dubai started cutting its subsidies as well. Dubai, I mean United Arab Emirates. started cutting subsidies to farm operations, and so in favor of imports. So what the governments decided to do was they realized collectively, all of the countries in the Middle East realized collectively that producing locally is not going to work. So they decided that what they were going to do, they were going to contract with farmers in third countries and other countries and other regions. And they've done, the Middle Eastern governments, a lot of them have investments in Africa and the former Soviet Union countries. And so what they've done is they've invested in farms so that they can bring the food products into the Middle East and have some control over food supply. And then the other thing they decided to do was to invest in processing, food processing, agribusinesses. When I was in Dubai about 4 or 5 years ago, the Saudi government financed a big rice processing facility between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And that facility, one of the largest I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's huge. So what the government said, if we can't produce it, what we'll do is we'll import unrefined product and refine it in the UAE. And then also, almost the same time, the government financed a grain silo, a big grain silo operation in Fujairah. And Fujairah is about 2.5 hours northeast of Dubai, and it's on the Gulf of Oman. They decided that what they were going to do is have grains brought into the big grain processing facility so they can control the food chain. So this is how they are trying to address the food security issue. So what does this all mean to you as a food exporter? It means that since they are not producing, the companies that are in the food processing are going to want to get input, and input would be food products that your companies produce to use. And they may bring it in under your company's label, or they may use a local label to repackage the product once it gets to the Middle East. There are in the United Arab Emirates, UAE we call it, about 430 food processing operations right now. And in Saudi Arabia, there are major investments being made in agribusinesses right now for processing. So there's a big push right now in the Middle East. And I know I probably threw out the term GCC, and I don't like using acronyms without defining what they mean. It stands for Gulf Cooperation Council. And let me see if I can flip this. Okay. So if you can see my slide, you have Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman. And depending on the political situation, you can add Yemen in there, but right now no one's counting Yemen as part of the GCC. But those countries form what's called the Gulf Cooperation Council. And it is a formal organization that has its headquarters in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So it's a formal structure. And in those forums they have for the GCC, they address all kinds of issues that concern the country's food security, all the other issues that they are dealing with. And what I want to do now is I want to give a structure of how I want to approach the webinar. And that is, I want to first give an overview of the Middle East market. Then I want to give you some advice on how to put together your marketing team for accessing free resources to help you market your products in the Middle East. And then I want to talk some about how you can get the most out of trade shows when you go to the Middle East or anywhere in the world. This is just my observations after years and years of having gone to trade shows, what you want to do to take full advantage of them. And then what I want to do is to talk about the major import regulations that companies have to abide by wanting to export food products to the Middle East. But first, an overview of the market. Um, before I jump into that, I want to just sort of give you an idea about the population centers in the Middle East and who you're trying to target. Saudi Arabia is the biggest country in terms of area and population. And it's at 34.1 million people. And then you have the UAE, 9.6 million. And then you have smaller percentages of countries with smaller populations. So if you're going to export to the Middle East, my advice is you target two markets and perhaps three, but two for certain: Saudi Arabia, because of the size, sheer magnitude, and you have a population that's somewhat homogeneous. You have, even though there's 48% foreign population, that gives you about half of that, 15, 16 million that are Saudis. And then you have the UAE with mostly our foreign population with 85%. So you'll see that the people from the region aren't that numerous, but they bring in a lot of people from other regions to work. And all of those factors play into the food imports. And then there are other issues I'm going to discuss later as to how all of this works together, to show you how the Middle East market works. First of all, in terms of an overview, the Middle East imports about $3.3 billion of US food per year. $3.3 billion of US food per year. And like I was telling Latasha and Courtney the other day, when I emphasize something, it's not that everything I said in the past was not important, but when I place emphasis on it, it means it's very important. And so it's very important to realize that the Middle East is a fairly large market for US agriculture and has been for quite some time. So it's been staying for the last 5-10 years, about 3.3 billion a year. And the kind of foods that are being imported are varied. Now, I was looking at the trade statistics for Saudi Arabia. They're mostly importing hay, obviously, for the reasons I already explained, soybeans, then corn and snack foods, nuts and snack foods. So those are the main products that Saudi Arabia is actually importing from the United States right now. Now, those are the main ones, but it just shows you the range, because if you were to go into the grocery store in Saudi Arabia, you're going to see almost every brand in the United States on the shelf. And so there's a lot of food from the United States that are being imported. And then when you take a look at United Arab Emirates, or UAE, you see also they're importing hay. They're also importing nuts and snack foods. They are importing a lot of beef, and then they're also importing a lot of poultry. And they are importing what we call prepared foods, like TV dinners and that sort of thing. And the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, which I'm going to say UAE from now on because I think we all know what the acronym means now. The UAE is an interesting case, so to speak. About 40 to 50% of the food that's being imported into the UAE, about $1.8 billion worth of food is coming from the United States to UAE, but 40 to 50% of that is being re-exported. And it's being re-exported once the food comes in. Let's say it comes through Dubai, and once it comes into Dubai, a lot of it is being offloaded into these boats called dhows. And they are boats that are on the creek, or Dubai Creek, and you'll see them every day. You go there, you see that all kind, not only food, but electronics, et cetera, all kinds of things are being put on those dials, and then they are being sent to other countries. Now, I'm gonna go back to my little map that I showed you earlier, and you can see where the UAE is. And what happens is that the products are being loaded on the boats, and then they're being taken to Iran. They're being taken up to Iraq. They're being taken down to Asia subcontinent, and then on down to Africa. They're going down to Africa as well. So the food products that are being brought into Dubai, a large percentage of it is for re-export. And so that's sort of that is an overview of the market for U.S. foods in the Middle East in terms of what's being imported, the big products. Now, there are two major events that I want to bring to your attention that have actually changed the dynamics of what's going on in the Middle East. One is called Expo 2020, which is going to start in Dubai in October. It's the equivalent of the World's Fair, and the last time it was in Milan. So what has happened is that there's been major investments made in the UAE for this event. But of course, no one knew we were going to have a coronavirus pandemic. So a lot of what's being planned for now was being planned with the thought that it would be a normal year and that we would have a big World Expo, et cetera, in Dubai, and they were going to have a lot of visitors. Dubai is the fourth most visited city in the world. Let me let that sink in for a moment. In a normal year, not thinking about coronavirus or anything else, Dubai is the fourth most visited city in the world in terms of tourism. People go there to go to the Burj Khalifa, they go there to go to Formula One racing, not in Dubai, but Abu Dhabi, which is about an hour and a half from Dubai. And so there are a lot of reasons, desert safaris, whatever other reasons they go to Dubai. They get a lot of tourism. The hotel industry is well developed. They have a lot of hotels and visitors coming in. And for every visitor or group of visitors or major events, people have to eat. So you have a lot of big food events, food festivals, etc., all the time. And so that's one of the reasons why you'll find that because of a lot of visitors coming through Dubai, they're coming from around the world, but also from around the region at the same time. And so now what I want to do is I want to go into what you need to do as a company to put together your marketing team. Your first line of marketeers would be Leticia and Courtney, because they are with American Indian Foods, and they're the folks that know they brought you me, which I hope is a good thing. And people like me, people with expertise that know the market, who've been in the market, who've worked in the market, and can give you good information about what you need to do as a company to access the market. And then I would say another good source of information and an organization that's actually putting together trade missions to the Middle East, and then buyers missions that are coming from the Middle East and from around the world to the United States, is the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. They organize trade missions throughout the year, and you can take advantage of those trade missions, and you'll be able to meet people who are in the business to buy foods from you. And then the organization called United States Agricultural Export Development Council. That organization has also good information on exporting. They provide a certain amount of export training as well. So I'm hoping that through Latasia and to Courtney, we can share this information so you don't have to look for it. They can send it out to you. And then all you have to do is to go to their website and see what it takes to get their information. It's pretty clear once you get on the website what to do. The next people, I would say that in my sense, the most important people, because I used to be them. I used to be the agriculture counselor in Dubai. And before that, years ago, I was the agricultural trade officer in Saudi Arabia. And so the people, my successors are there. And in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia is Alan Holman. He's agriculture attaché that covers Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, along with Hussein Musa. And anything that you would want to know about Saudi Arabia or Bahrain, they know it in terms of food trade. They're the folks who are going to be the ones, they're going to be your primary contacts in terms of food trade in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. And then in Dubai, the head of that office is Kurt Seifert. And then he has several marketing specialists, but I just put Mohammed Hamza's name there because his information was the most ready at hand at the time. But you can contact them if you have specific questions about the UAE, about Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, because they cover all those countries. And so those are the folks that you want to be your prime contacts, and they're the ones you want to talk to. I want to step back a little bit because I missed part of what I wanted to say about the market in general. And one of the things I missed was how food is distributed in the Middle East. And part of it is simply the same as here in the United States. For example, gas stations now in the Middle East are, they serve food. I was there when I was there about 5 years ago, a big pizza company installed pizza cooking facilities at gas stations throughout throughout the UAE. And so, but what you find is in the gas station, you have grocery store items and other food items that you can get. And then there are large supermarket chains similar to, I guess, what you call Albertsons, excuse me. And Smith's Foods and Drug Centers. I think they'll be out in the west part of the country. And they have the equivalent stores in across the Middle East. And two of the big stores in the Middle East is called Spinneys and Lulu's. And those stores are similar to any Albertsons or any other grocery store you have in the United States. Then I already mentioned the fact that there's a big tourism industry in the Middle East, especially Dubai. And then with the tourism, there is the casual dining. Like you have Famous Dave's, who's out there, just opened up a store in Abu Dhabi about 4 or 5 years ago. I was at the grand opening. Five Guys, as I already mentioned, and all of the formula races and big main events they have out there. And so just to give you, that was just to give you some idea. And then a lot of these work camps where they bring in the construction workers, they will buy poultry from the United States in bulk in order to feed the workers for those construction projects. And I want to now shift to how you can get the most out of trade shows. I know I had mentioned that you could actually go to Gulf Food Show, or Gulf Food Show is the major trade show in the world for food. It's the largest annual food show in the world. But that's not the only show that takes place in the UAE. And I'm going to talk about the UAE trade shows because the trade shows in Saudi Arabia, even though that's a big market, they're not well developed in terms of, they're not well developed in terms of, I went to what you call agriculture, Saudi agriculture 2019 last year. And in terms of size, I would say it's a fraction of Gulf Food Show. So you're not looking the same. It's not the same level yet. Saudi Arabia is trying to become more of a trade show hub, but it's going to have a hard time for a lot of reasons because it's not set up for easy entry, even though the visa process has gotten easier over the past 6 months. But in the UAE, there, besides Gulf food, you have AgriMe, which is an agriculture input show, so to speak. Agriculture farming, agriculture, etc. Animal health issues are covered at that show, and that's in March. And then you have Dubai International Wood Show, which is also in March every year. And then Seattle Middle East, which is in September, this September. My only issue with having a trade show in Abu Dhabi is that most of the business people are in Dubai. And for whatever reason, they don't want to travel to Abu Dhabi. So a lot of the trade shows that have taken place in Abu Dhabi have not gotten the attendance that that the shows in Dubai get. And then you have in September also what's called Halal Expo. And then there are a group of shows called the fall shows. And the fall shows are run by Dubai World Trade Center. And those shows run at the same time. It's called Gulf Food Manufacturing. It's a big food and beverage processing show. And these shows are running in November. And then another show called CFEX is a seafood show, obviously. And then Yumex is a sweets show. Those three shows run at the same time. You're not going to know you're going to different shows. You just run from one big hall to another. And so the people in the U.S. sweets industry are not too happy about this because they wanted the show the Yumex, the sweet show, to run with Gulf Food because they would meet more buyers at Gulf Food than they would in the fall. But the reason why Dubai World Trade Center decided they were going to break that show out is because Gulf Food was getting too big to manage. And so they decided they were going to make certain that they were going to break it out, to make it, to take parts of the Gulf Food Show out of the Gulf Food Show in February, March, and to put it in the fall. But if you're exporting seafood, CFEX would be worth your while to look at. Now I want to talk about the trade shows and what you can do to get the most out of the trade shows. I would say the main work that you need to, the main bulk of your work before you go to a trade show should happen 2 or 3 months before the trade show. I would say the first thing you need to do is to go to the Office of Agriculture whose information I gave you, and ask them to send you a list of the buyers. And then I would suggest you reach out to those buyers for the buyers that buy your products, and establish an email relationship with them 2 to 3 months in advance. And then once you establish an email correspondence with them about your products, then I would say 4 weeks or so before the show, 4 to 6 weeks before the show, to actually set up a meeting. And it's okay to invite them for a coffee or to invite them for lunch. That's fine. I think it'd be very difficult to get any of them to go to dinner because of the problem you're going to have in terms of them being busy with meetings and having to travel home, etc. But I think that that work needs to be done because once you get to the show, the first full day of the show is when you're going to see most of the serious buyers. They're going to come then, the first part of the show. The latter part of the show is when you're going to see people just coming to see what's going on. So you have to prepare for taking advantage of the first full day of the show, not the grand opening, because that's we all know that's just a flash. People coming in and some high level person is going to walk through in 5 seconds. So, but the point I want to make is that you really want to take advantage of the first full day of the show. You want to make certain that you already made your primary contacts weeks in advance of the show, so that once you get to the show, you can actually seriously be there to talk business. So that's very important for you to know. And last but not least, I'm going to talk briefly about the major import restrictions. And I think I have a slide on that, so you don't have to write all this down. And so I'm just to go through briefly, Arabic labeling, stickers, and stickers are fine. Production and expiry dates must be ink jetted directly onto the packaging. Product claims such as lower cholesterol, that sort of thing has to be supported. You just can't make a claim. Shelf life issues, you have to make certain that you abide by the shelf life for your particular product. And then I put down the last thing was what's called the FAIRS report. It's Food and Agricultural Import Regulations and Standards report. And so the office in Dubai has one of those, has already one of those reports done. And I'm sure they have the same equivalent report for Saudi Arabia. Those reports give you more specific information um, about the certificate requirements. So that means that they will give you the copies of all of the certificates that are required. So all you have to do is go to the Agricultural Affairs Office and ask them to give you the FAIRS report, and they'll be able to give it to you. Now, I covered a lot of material in a relatively short period of time, but it's a good overview of how to get your products in the Middle East. And I hope that this has been helpful. And I'm ready to entertain any questions now. It's quiet, so that means I must have done a great job and I can go home. I'm already home.
Yeah, I think everyone has not left home for sure since weeks. But yeah, if there are any questions, I'm just looking at the chat right now to see if there were any submissions of questions. But let's see here. Great. Yep. No questions.
Hey, Lottie.
Oh, hey. Hi, Jacob.
Hey, this is Jacob Pelkiev in Caribou, Maine. Thanks for the presentation today. It's really helpful to bring some things to be thinking about to the forefront of our mind as we prepare for it. But Quinn, I just wanted to ask you if you could expand on the fact that we're a small producer, and I was hoping you could talk about what quantities are more eligible to be accepted in the market and what quantities are harder to get in. Because for our farm, we would be shipping cases of about 100 pounds would be our minimum case shipment that we could entertain, whereas the highest that we would be able to entertain would be 1 pallet, which would be 500 pounds. And at this time, there's some challenges with our product. It's not a packaged consumer good or a PCG, but rather it's a fresh fish, never previously frozen product. And I didn't know if you had any specifics about pointers that I should be aware of thinking about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I meant to raise the issue about shipping, and this is a situation. Most of the major importers, let's say Lulu's is a grocery store chain. They have a warehouse in New Jersey. They opened up about 5 years ago. So the price that they're going to ask you to quote is not going to be a price of how much it costs to get the product to the Middle East. It's going to be how much it costs to get the product to New Jersey. And Spinney's, the other major importing company, has a consolidator in California. So they're going to be asking you the same thing. How much is it going to cost to get your product? They have to pay to get your product shipped to California. And so in terms of quantity, that solves a lot of problems because the consolidators are going to be consolidating the shipments. And so that'll allow you to ship smaller quantities because you don't have to worry about trying to get a container load of whatever you're going to be sending overseas. And so the consolidators, you can get that information from the offices of, you should be able to get it from the Office of Agricultural Affairs. And some of them I know myself. So, and yeah, yeah. That's I guess that's the best answer to your question. And you just made me think of something else, but I'll wait until after see if we have any more questions.
No, thank you, Quinn. That helps clarify a lot. I have heard about the consolidator option, and so that clears it up a little bit for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, Latasha. This is Everett Anderson. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Hey, so we've only met by email, but hi, Quentin. Thanks for your presentation. That's super helpful. I just wanted to quickly introduce ourselves. Actually, my colleague, Bill Weeds, on as well. We are a seafood company, Alaska Native Corporation-owned seafood company.
Mm-hmm.
Our offices are based here in Seattle. Our parent company is based in Anchorage, Alaska. Our focus has been on Pacific cod, and we target other species as well. But did you? What's your take on seafood into the Middle East? If you could just talk to that a little bit, and then Bill, definitely jump in, Bill, if I miss something or overspeak, but definitely hop in.
They absolutely love seafood. I can guarantee that. So seafood in the Middle East is a part of the cuisine. You know, I would say almost a natural part of their cuisine. So in terms of a market for seafood, there have been some companies in the Middle East that have come to the United States looking specifically for seafood. And but they wanted the seafood, they wanted to have canned salmon is one of the big items one of the companies was looking for in Saudi Arabia. And so I guess the answer is yes, they're looking for seafood, they want seafood. And in particular, you know, whether it's fresh or canned, they are looking for it. So there's a high demand for seafood in the Middle East.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, and I've been fortunate in the past to have worked with the American Indian Foods Program in different capacities. Currently, Latasha, I know we're not officially quote unquote part of the AIF program, but we are in discussions on getting all that paperwork back to you folks. But the AIF program has certainly helped some of the past opportunities that I've been involved with through the program. Been able to make it to Asian markets and across the domestic market here in the United States through the National Restaurant Association shows and Boston CENA. And so I don't see this being any different in terms of the exposure and the opportunities that this program presents are remarkable. And your feedback here, Quentin, will be certainly key as we try to figure out some next steps. This is extremely helpful information. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, this is Bill Weed, Everett's colleague. Just to follow up on his question, again, thank you for this presentation. It's very informative. Most information on that market since my time in the seafood business. I wanted to see and check on that area. Different parts of the world prefer or are different price level items. Some markets prefer a more premium product, while others will prefer lower end products. Do you have a feel for, is there that desire for more premium products in the Middle East, in these markets that you're typically referring to with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, or is it just kind of a broad spectrum?
That's a very, very good question, because you have a little bit of both. You have, of course, obviously the Saudis, for example, or the Emiratis, for example. They're going to want a higher quality food because they have a lot more disposable income. And so they're going to look for the absolute best of whatever you have to offer. Then you're going to have, as most of those statistics show, you have a large worker population in each country. And so that population with not as much disposable income are going to be going for price. They're going to go for the sometimes the least expensive thing that they can buy because they don't have the disposable income. So you have a little bit of both in the market, because you have high-end everything there, all kinds of fancy restaurants. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I remember looking at the cost of meat. I couldn't afford it myself, at least I didn't want to afford it. It was so expensive. But you get that coming in there all the time. Not so much in Saudi Arabia now, because we've had some issues with the hormone issue in beef. And there are like some specific regulations that are hindering the export of beef to Saudi Arabia. But you don't have that problem in the UAE. So you go to those fancy restaurants in Burj Khalifa, etc., Dubai Mall, etc., you're going to see every expensive cut of American food there, beef or whatever we have, at the high end. But the worker camps, you're going to find a lot of U.S. poultry, but they're going to be exporting that in bulk, and it's going to be cheaper.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For the answer. Thank you.
Now I think I forgot to mention about to put a plug in for our webinar next week, which is going to be concerning halal. And it's a really, really interesting issue, because the halal market is over $1 trillion if you count all aspects of halal. And so it's a very important issue to understand if you're going to be exporting to the Middle East or to Asia. Because it's an issue that impacts all, I would say literally all food exports, not only meat and poultry. Most people think of halal, they think about slaughtering animals a certain way, blah, 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 and they think that that's it. But that's not all of it. If you're going to be exporting to Indonesia or to Malaysia, you have to have a different picture of the halal issue that's more comprehensive and global. And so as a result, that webinar, which is going to be on the 9th of April, at the same time as this one was. Because I'm going to go into more detail about halal, what it means, the market size, what issues a company has to consider when they're thinking about exporting to a halal market, primarily Muslim population, and how they can position their product. There's a lot of U.S. industry groups that are looking at this issue right now. I spoke at a conference put on by the U.S. Dairy Export Council a few months ago in Chicago on this issue. And so they brought in a lot of people from their organization and experts from around the country to discuss the issue of halal and what impact it's going to have on the dairy trade. And so I was one of the speakers. So I'll be talking about that next week. So yeah, I wanted to give myself a free plug there, an AIF a free plug.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Quentin. If there are no other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up the Q&A session. And we hope that everyone will join us next week when we do dive into the halal labeling and the market, continue to learn about the Middle East market and expand our knowledge there. If you would like to reach out to Courtney, myself, and would like a meeting with Quentin, we can make that happen as well. Feel free to, again, just reach out with any questions. And I look forward to hearing from you, Everett. And I'd love to learn more about how we can help you during this time, and everyone else. Like, again, it's a challenging time with this pandemic, and I'm stuck at home with my kids, so it's definitely a trying time for sure.
Yeah.
But thanks again, Quentin. We'll go ahead and
All
wrap
right.
this up, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you guys or hearing from you guys next week.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone.